Hey guys, I'm Eric the Goblin, and I haven't made a video in a little bit, but I thought actually I would talk about a method I have been using to generate dungeon layouts. So this is a Dungeons and Dragons related video. I really like this hobby, and even though I don't stick to the current edition of the world's most popular role-playing game, I do still spend a lot of time thinking about ways to make the life of the referee, the dungeon master, easy. So recently I came up on this idea of using dice tossed on a page to help come up with a layout. And I've seen a lot of different variations online on how to do this. So this is one that I'm going to show you that I think I like a lot. So for this, you'll need graph paper. You'll need a writing implement of some kind. This is a mechanical pencil. And you'll need some 6-sided dice. And you'll need some 8-sided dice. I don't know exactly how many you'll need of each. Just make sure you have some. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to decide how many rooms, main rooms, your dungeon is going to have. So for this, we're going to just start small. We're going to take 4. We'll take these 4, roll them up, toss them down. And now where they land is actually the part of this that is interesting. Each one of these can be easily seen on this graph paper, right? And just a little bit of adjustment shows where they land. Let's get this camera a little modeled. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make note of where each of these dice landed and the number that showed up, right? So once I got that done, we'll head right back to how this process works. All right, so you can see that I have marked out on the graph sheet where each of the dice landed and then a number. So what does that number exactly mean? That number means that we're going to figure out exactly the directions that this room expands in. Because this isn't the room itself, this is just where the dice landed, right? So we're going to take number 6 here. If we count along the edges of this square here, we notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 directions we can go in, 8 cardinal compass directions, right? So if we take some 8-sided dice, in this case we're going to use 6 because the number is 6. We're going to take these, we're going to roll them, and we're going to look at what we got here. And each one of these numbers tells us how far in that direction we're going to make this room extend. Right? So starting with 1, we have 2 5s, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that this particular room stretches down, and we'll just say it stretches down 2 lengths of what the original room, whatever I drew it is. Right? These are gone. Next is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 3 of them. This room extends 3 times in this direction. And now 8, right? 8 is right above the 7, which means that the final layout of this room is this irregular shape. Once you get rid of all the lines. Now that certainly looks a little more like something you could recognize as part of a maze, right? This looks like a hallway to me. So now we just mark this off. This is area 1. I will continue to do the same for the other spots, and we will reconvene once I have done that. So something to note here. When I drew this room and started taking into account where the dice were making extend, we had 2 extensions going southeast diagonally, right? Which means that it came in contact with this other structure, this other room that we had. But because it extended diagonal, we have these spaces where it looks like there's no possible way for them to extend, you know, because this is diagonal. So how do you deal with that? Well, this is the part where you, as a creative individual, have to make interpretations of what the dice give you, right? One simple solution would be to just make it a corridor like that. That's how I'm going to choose to deal with that. And there's probably a lot of ways you could make these places interconnect in a manner that, you know, is more satisfying than 2 blocks. But, you know, the dice, where they land, are just suggestions to make your mind start coming up with ideas of its own, which is, you know, the whole fun of dungeon prep. We're going to continue drawing this map. So, after we've taken the time to generate the other extensions of the rooms we're in, you'll notice that we have 3 separate distinct structures that don't quite look like rooms, do they? Well, why don't we generate some more? This time we'll take 3 dice here. Just toss it on the page. One of them didn't land. It's going right back. Now we'll figure out how to set these up in a way. Look, this one even landed in a spot where it makes complete sense. And because this is close to the edge of the page, I'm actually going to throw this again. It's still a 5, but it's right there. So now we make notes of where each of these dice landed. And then again, we generate how far they extend. We're going to start with this guy right here, which requires 6 of these dice. And we're going to take them as they come. So 4, an 8, another 8, which means that it goes this way, extends that way. Which also means that because it goes into this structure here, we're not going to make it extend another point, because it's already there. We're just going to have to make artistic interpretations of what these 3 rooms actually look like. 2 5s. Let's do that one real fast. Last is a 7, which we know just means that it extends towards the west. But because we have this diagonal here, we're just going to do like this to make sense of where these extensions are coming from. So I'll come back once I've got the rest of these areas generated. Okay, so this is after 2 iterations of this dice tossing process. You can see that what's drawn on the graph paper looks much more suitable for the start or layout of a dungeon, right? At this point, you can either continue iterating on the process by tossing more and more dice, or you can start using what's here to start making connections, you know, start making rooms. So if we don't even want to look at like any dice anymore, let's say that we're satisfied with what we have here. What are places that would make good connections? So this is just what I am seeing. Maybe you see something different. You know, everyone's going to have a different idea when they see the same results. You know, and so everyone's going to come up with different results as well. You know, not everyone is going to take the same, I guess you call it, ideas. And they're not going to come to the same conclusions as, you know, other people. And that's okay too. That's fantastic. That's what makes this hobby so very, very fun to play with new people. Because each person is going to have their own thoughts about what it means to be a dungeon master, right? Everyone's going to have different ideas about what a goblin does. Everyone's going to have different ideas about how clerics should be, right? There are rules about how to play the cleric. There are rules about healing spells. But there's no rules that say that the cleric has to be a holy man, part of an organized church, right? I believe that the only requirements is that they're a man of faith and a man at arms, right? That could very easily be a cultist. That could very easily be a shaman. That could very easily be any number of ideas of this like holy warrior, right? And because the interpretation is left to each individual, this is a hobby that you can enjoy over and over again with the same group or with different people and still find something new to enjoy, right? So now we have this layout, and if you wanted to, that could be it, right? Or you could take your trusty set of colored pens, right? Because they're fine liners, because of course they are. And you could start color coding things if you're a huge nerd, or if you're just artistically inclined that way, right? So what could we do? What could we color? Well, the first thing that's obvious to me, doors, right? They're not all going to be open areas where you can just walk in between. Clearly, you're going to need to open and close some doors. And now I'm just outlining places that are, to me, good places for doors. Interconnecting areas. I think that's about good right there. Whether or not the doors are locked, that's up to you to decide. What else could you mark on here, though? Well, there's going to need to be an entrance, right? How do you get in and out of this place? You could either leave that up to the dice, or you could look at this and figure out what seems like it would be a good place. To my eye, this little area right here would seem like the ideal place. I'm going to draw these lines here to represent stairs. And they're going down. So that means that this dungeon is one that you walked downstairs to get into this hallway, into this first area here. Right? What other things could you mark down? What are other things that you've seen on maps, right? Well, dungeons are typically known for having dangerous denizens, right? And I love alliteration, so that's a little extra bonus for you guys. If we're looking at this map, I think this area right here, because it's central and kind of like how you get to this area, this would be a good place to put some kind of monster, some kind of encounter. We're going to put an M here. Just so that we know that this area is where we want to have our monster, the big threat of the room. I don't like to use the word boss because that implies you're going to beat this guy or that he needs to be destroyed. What I will say, though, is that this monster here at the center of this dungeon is going to flavor my choices for what I populate it with. Because in order for it to feel like it makes sense to players, there has to be things that connect to each other, that relate to each other, right? So now I know whatever room this little area is in, that is where our major threat is. So I'm actually getting off topic because this was just about using dice to draw up a dungeon. But you can see with just a few starting ideas, you already have more to work with than if you were trying to come up with this completely on the spot, on your own. I actually see a spot where a door needs to go. Hold up. All right. Maybe I will finish this video with this dungeon completed. But for now, I will say that using this method, you can come up with some, you know, sporadic, weird looking constellations of mazes. But when you allow yourself to take that initial starting, that foundation, you can build onto that and come up with something that you wouldn't have thought of on your own, right? It still comes from you, but instead of being born out of the void, you now have a foundation to work off of. So yeah, thanks for watching my video, and I will at some point create more role-playing content. Take care, guys.